Well, Dee Dee Hirsch has a special program for military families coping with deployments and reunions. Please meet the Thompsons.
I was in the Army National Guard from '07 to 2014. Served in Iraq in '08, '09. It was very tough saying goodbye to my family. You know, not knowing if I would see them again, how they were going to be without me, just being that far away from them and not knowing if they were okay, and I couldn't be there for them.
You know, it was stressful. There was a lot of things going on at that time. Once he came back home, was difficult for both of us. It was difficult, you know, reintegrating back into, you know, married life and having, you know, a husband there that's supportive. And it was a welcome thing, but it was still difficult in the beginning. I
kind of did feel like a stranger in my own home coming back from Iraq. The kids didn't, I don't know, I guess maybe recognize my authority over them. It was just a lack of communication within our family, and we needed to work on that. In the military, we deal with communication. Everything is communication. I needed a way to learn how to communicate with them better, and Dee Hirsch definitely seemed like the best route for us. I'm not sitting there trying to bark orders like I got a bunch of soldiers. It's definitely helped. The Focus program, it actually split us up and allowed us to work into two different teams and collectively come together later. It really allowed us to see each other's point of view.
The Focus program really helped us. It was really interesting to see collectively that we all were kind of feeling and thinking similar things.
You're looking out for yourself and everybody around you at all times, and doing that for a long period of time, it takes a toll. War always is going to change you. And even when you feel like you're still the same person, you're not. The only thing you can do is cope with it and make it a part of you. And what might prevent some military families from getting help, just a feeling like we've got this. Like, I made it through a war, I've been shot at. Family life, no big deal, I can take care of it. But it's not always like that. It takes a lot of adjusting.
Would Steve and Raquel and their kids please stand? Where are you? In each of your own way, you've served our country. Thank you so much. I'm very excited right now. With a worldwide readership of more than 110 million, Dear Abby has a devoted following who wouldn't dream of starting each day without her. The most widely syndicated columnist in the world, Dear Abby is well known for sound, compassionate advice delivered with straightforward style of a good friend. She's here tonight to present a leadership award to Ryan Anderson, so please welcome Dear Abby.
Thousands of people reach out to me every day, well, not every day, but every year about suicide. It might be in an email where someone mentions that they're having a tough time and thinking about killing themselves, whatever. I call those people. Now, some people are just grieving. Others are worried about somebody who's fragile. I'm glad my column is a safe place to ask for help. I agree with Academy Award winner Dana Perry, who lost a teenage son, Evan, to suicide. As she accepted her Oscar, she said, "We need to talk about suicide out loud." I would I would add to that, we especially need men to speak up. Almost all of the messages I receive about suicide come from women. Yet 4 times as many men die by their own hand. That is what makes our next honoree, Ryan Anderson, such a hero. Not only is he a guy, he's an NBA forward whose every move may hit the newspapers. When Ryan's girlfriend, Gia Alamand, died by suicide, he decided to honor her by learning everything he could about suicide and using their story to educate others. Last week, Ryan's team, the New Orleans Pelicans, landed a spot in the playoffs. Yay, hear, hear. They're playing their 3rd game in New Orleans tonight, but his parents are here with us, and his father will accept the award for him. Please welcome Jack Anderson. Thank you. Here you go. This is for you with love. Off and running.
Yes, I want to thank you so much for giving this award to Ryan. It's an incredible thing, and he regrets not being here, but he's got a real good reason for not being here. And he's one of those under 30 people you were talking about earlier. He's 27 years old. So suicide hit my son very personally. You know, up till the point that this happened in his life, he had like kind of a charmed life. All through his youth, he was just all about sports. It was his own thing. And high school and college came around. He always had coaches and people who were supporting him. And he got into the NBA when he was 19. Pretty remarkable. And then along came this wonderful girl, Gia. And she was radiant and beautiful. And she was sweet. She had everything going for her that our world puts on people. She looked like she had the world tied with a ribbon. And she was on TV and she had fame of her own and all this sort of wonderful thing happening. One of Ryan's favorite stories of his life right now is of remembering when they went to China together. I mean, this girl had travel, all kinds of stuff, but they went to China together. And he was over there to represent the NBA in different Chinese cities, Shanghai, etc. And she would get all dressed up and walk down the street, and people would stop and stare. She had it all going for her. And I thought that this girl was going to be my daughter-in-law. And then they had a horrible fight one night, and she took her life. And Ryan found her, and he was the one that called 911, called for help. But it was too late. And we were all there in the hospital when she passed away. And I've never witnessed someone that I love so much expressing so much grief and heartbreak. He was just heartbroken. And any of you that are parents know what that feels like if your kids have suffered in some way. You'd want to suffer more yourself. But so it affected me too, this whole thing. And here this girl who had everything going for her, under the surface, under this fragile surface she had, was a world of wounds and disappointments and fear and doubt and things that had dogged her whole life. Things that Ryan didn't even know about. This was all such a surprise. Hers was the first funeral he ever attended. It was incredible. Some of the words we've heard tonight, secrets and hurts and hides. She hid these things very well. We didn't know she had this history of things. So as I came tonight to represent Ryan, I was given a wonderful list of things that I might talk about, including things like how did this affect our life and feelings about what do I think about Ryan speaking out and doing this, and probably about 4 hours worth of content. They asked me to do it in 3 minutes. So I'm going to boil down what we've learned into 3 little bullets. The first thing that we learned about this, it really opened our eyes to the world of suicide and how much it affects so many different people, and how it affects those that are left behind. I think that we'll be having things in our minds, questions in our minds, the rest of our lives. The what if questions, what if we had seen something differently? What if we could have observed something or asked a question in a different way? And it's so odd when something like this happens, you look back and things make sense from hindsight. If only. We're going to have those the rest of our lives. But so the first thing was an eye-opening. The second thing was to be aware of the help that's available today. It's absolutely remarkable. I relate to so many of the stories that I heard. When I was growing up, you didn't talk about any of this stuff. You didn't talk about it. My cousin committed suicide. We did not talk about it. How could that have been? But today there's help available, and there's all kinds of resources. As soon as Ryan experienced this, we were able to help him get a psychologist, a grief counselor, and people that were able to help him cope with this stuff. Imagine this happens. He had to fly back to New York to go to his first funeral. The media was around, cameras and all kinds of stuff were there. It was, how do you cope? He had help. And the third thing I want to say that we learned was about a voice. And Ryan would tell you that this tragedy gave him a voice. And he's able to use his voice to make this something that's discussed. And thank you for that introduction. That's exactly what he's around. He wants to learn about this and have others learn about it. But the other part about the voice thing that we learned was, if anyone's listening to this and you're experiencing problems yourself, you have a voice. You have something wonderful to offer. Please speak up. Please reach out to people. You have a voice. This has also helped me have a voice. So I'll end this by saying, how do I feel about Ryan speaking up? Dang proud.
Thank you to dear Abby for that call to action, and thank you, Mr. Anderson, for being here for your son. Yes. Our last video features Esther Ybarra Bryant and Dee Dee Hirsch's Suicide Prevention Center.
Hello, my name is Esther Ybarra Bryant. I lost my son, Nathan, to suicide. Nathan played baseball, soccer, was a little altar boy in church, played the trumpet in school, loved math and science. I mean, he was outgoing, he was out boy, he was happy once upon a time. I remember it was a Tuesday morning. I had to get to work. Nathan said he was sick, so he stayed home. He was 13, and I trusted him. When my daughter got home from high school, she found Nathan in the garage. It was filled with the carbon monoxide from the car. Nathan was growing up. He was becoming a man, so I thought it was for a different reason that he was acting out or his grades were falling. And it was approaching the anniversary for the first year. And I told myself that night I didn't want to wake up the next morning and that I was going to take an overdose. So I called the operator and I asked her to please call my mom tomorrow and tell her that it wasn't her fault. And the operator said, wait, we can connect you to someone who can help you. So I got connected to a counselor and talked to the counselor for 2 hours and cried. And it was at the end when she asked me that one question that made the connection. She asked me if I killed myself, who was going to find me in the morning? And I said my daughter would. She'd give me a kiss goodbye before she'd go to school. And in saying that, I understood she would not survive my death. I'm alive because of the crisis line counselor. And that's why I do what I do in volunteering with Dee Dee Hirsch and the suicide support groups. We want people to call the crisis line, people to come to Didi Hirsch, people to call us and get the help they need.
Where are you, Esther? Esther, where are you? Over there. Thank you for saying suicide out loud and for turning the force of your pain into life-saving volunteer work. Thank you, Esther. I love you. Our next presenter, Steve Lopez, is loved by the mental health community for his columns and his book, The Soloist, the story of Steve and his friend, Nathaniel Ayers. They got to know each other in the 2nd Street Tunnel near the LA Times building. Nathaniel lived on Skid Row and was looking for strings for his violin. Steve was looking for a story. They found a lot more than that, a place for Nathaniel to live and a reunion with his long-lost family. Nathaniel changed Steve's life, too. He pierced the invisible wall between journalists and their subjects. Through ups and downs, he and Steve have been friends for the last 10 years, doing God's work in the 2nd Street Tunnel. Please welcome Steve Lopez, who will present Erasing the Stigma Leadership Awards to Daryl and Jordana Steinberg.
Hello, thank you. It's an honor to be here. And for those of you who know him or just may be wondering, I'd like to report that Nathaniel is doing quite well these days. We speak just about daily, and he's doing well because of the help of great nonprofits. The LA County Department of Mental Health stepped in on his behalf, and he's doing well. And people ask me often, 10 years into this adventure of ours, how they can make a difference. And one way is to support great institutions like Didi Hirsch. So your support here tonight is greatly appreciated, and each and every one of you can make a difference. I'm going to ask that photographer to please step just a little bit to the left so that I can see my notes. Thank you. That is a long ways away, too, to have to read, and these are not the right glasses for that. So bear with me. Growing up, I sometimes heard whispers about the 2 suicides in my family, an uncle and an aunt. My father's brother and sister taking their own lives in our tiny little community up in Northern California. But it was a time when you didn't talk about those things. It was getting to know Nathaniel many years later that made mental health personal for me and drove home the importance of Daryl Steinberg's advocacy. Without the bills that Daryl sponsored, I don't know if Nathaniel and many others like him would still be alive today. Daryl is most famous for Proposition 63, a ballot measure that Californians passed in the year 2004. With it came a tax of 1% on any income over $1 million and earmarked for mental health. It made us Daryl is the godfather there. A few years ago, the city of Sacramento picked The Soloist as one book, one community, and I went up there for that, and it was an honor to go with Daryl to an event at a Sacramento high school where I told the students that there might be no one in the history of California who's done more for people with a mental illness than Daryl Steinberg. The Mental Health Service Act, it's called. It funds everything from prevention and early intervention to homeless outreach. That alone is the achievement of a lifetime, but it's only one example of Daryl's leadership. He began his advocacy more than 20 years ago, and he's still at it. Children's mental health, emergency services, crisis counseling. When Daryl cares, he does something about it. I admire him so much, I even thought about leaving journalism, going to work for him when the Mental Health Services Act was first initiated. I then realized I'd have to go to a lot of meetings. My wife pointed out that Arnold Schwarzenegger might be at some of them, that it wasn't going to work out. I'd also have to give up my soapbox because I was on a mental health odyssey. I felt compelled to share with the public through columns about Nathaniel and others. What I didn't know was that during his years in office, mental health became a family matter for Daryl. His daughter had developed extreme mood swings, and nothing that the family did seemed to work. He sometimes felt as overwhelmed as I did with Nathaniel, and I still wouldn't know about his family if his daughter, Jordana, hadn't stepped forward last year to tell her story to a few journalists, including me. We in the mental health community know the importance of getting the right kind of help early and often, but it doesn't always work that way. And back in Nathaniel's day, it happened rarely, if ever. It's hard to undo decades of fear and mistrust, some of which is a product of the illness, some of which is a byproduct of life on the streets, and some of which is a response to the stigma and misconception around mental illness. But Jordana bravely stepped into the spotlight. Why, you ask? Perhaps because she knew how helpless her parents must have felt, and because of how alone she might have felt. And now, because of her courage and honesty, Jordana is a beacon of hope for all the kids hurting out there. She's proof that things really can get better. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big hand for two heroes, Daryl and Jordana Steinberg.
Wow. Thank you. You know, I've probably given a few thousand public speeches in my public life, but I don't think I've ever been so nervous because this is a unique and special evening for me. I want to begin by thanking Steve Lopez, who is a friend and a champion, and while at the time I was disappointed that Steve did not choose to spend his working days hanging out with Arnold Schwarzenegger and me, I must tell you that I am so glad that he chose to remain at his coveted position, because there is no one I know who has done more to bust stigma in unprecedented ways by powerfully humanizing mental health and mental illness for millions and millions of readers and moviegoers as well. Thank you so much, Steve. You honor me and Jordana for taking time out of your busy life to be here. I want to thank Dee Dee Hirsch for this wonderful honor, and especially Nancy Rubin and Dr. Keita Curry, who I've known for so many years and who are heroes to me as well, and your entire board and your program, some of which we have seen tonight, for exemplifying the model for which we aspire to for our state and for our nation. I want to thank and recognize my friend Rusty Seelix, who is my co-proponent for Prop 63, who's here tonight, a great champion. And thank you all for coming tonight and for supporting Dee Dee Hirsch. You know, the truth is, in my tenure as a public official, I've been recognized a few times, but never with my daughter, Jordy, my baby girl, who turned 21 years old last week. And ever since, and you'll hear from her in a moment, I said I would go first here tonight, so just to... Ever since Jordana chose to tell her story publicly, people have said to me that she is courageous. And I don't know why. Maybe it's my own sense of ingrained modesty, the way that I was taught, but I always minimize that by saying that she just did the right thing and is trying to help others. But the truth really is, what she did was and is incredibly courageous. For if it wasn't difficult, if there wasn't risk, if our fight to erase stigma was complete, more people would readily come out of the closet. And some people do, but too many still don't. You did, and I love you, and I'm very proud of you, sweetie. But I'm not done. For Jordy's act must be repeated thousands of times over before our battle is won. It is high time we bring mental health and mental illness out of the closet. It is time to stop locking so many people up whose crimes, and often minor crimes, were only the result of an untreated mental illness. It is time, and high time, to end the stereotype that mental illness must mean a life sentence of hopelessness, of unemployment, and of disconnection with family and with community. And despite the fact that we have made enormous progress on both the stigma issue and the beginning of building a decent system of community-based care for people, it is high time we fulfill the promise in California made now almost 50 years ago when we shut the state mental hospitals to build a system of community-based care that denies no one and makes it easy for people to get the help that they need. For I believe we are on the edge of the next great movement. These issues are far too widespread. They are pervasive. They know no artificial boundaries or community or political affiliation or any other category that usually divides people. They affect too many of the serious issues which we ask representative government to tackle: the plight of veterans, criminal justice, housing and homelessness itself. And despite those two facts, with rare exception, what it takes to help people with mental health get better, suffer less, and live productive lives too often gets scant attention from the political world, from representative government, and from the public at large. We must change that together. I am absolutely convinced that the most powerful obstacle to really defeating stigma is to overcome the pervasive but mistaken belief that people don't get better, that homelessness is hopelessness, and that tragedies and loss are the only predictable outcomes, instead of support, safe, independent living, work, reconnection with family, and all we want for ourselves and the ones we love. And how do we do it? We have to tell thousands of more stories to normalize this issue. When Jordana went public, back 6 months ago now, there is not a week that goes by where 5 people don't stop me on the K Street Mall or write me or text me and tell me their stories. I don't know that that would have happened but for her courage. Think about multiplying that so many times over. We have to tell the success of programs like Dee Hirsch and the Mental Health Services Act itself. 35,000 people are now getting the whatever it takes approach provided by Dee Hirsch and other organizations throughout the state, throughout the Mental Health Services Act. 35,000 people. And they're getting good results. People are living better lives, and yet, if we're ever going to get more money and more resources and more attention, we can't be shy about putting forth the data in credible ways combined with the stories. It's an immovable force. I want to end, before I turn it over to my beautiful daughter, with a confession. I became leader of the Senate in December of 2008, and I inherited a $40 billion budget deficit on a base budget of $100 billion. And it just so happened that during my first year was the time when things were probably the hardest and the worst for Jordy and our family. And I can remember many times when I was in the most intense of budget meetings, trying to figure this thing out, when my cell phone would ring, and it would be my wife, usually my wife, Julie, who's a wonderful mother and wife. Sometimes it would be Jordana, and I knew it wouldn't be good. And I would not pick up the phone, and then it would ring again, and it would ring again, and it would ring again, and I'd finally pick it up, and I'd deal with something that wasn't so good and pleasant, and I'd have to go in the other room, address it the best I could, compose myself, and go back in and resume my work. And I must tell you, during that time and many periods of time, both Julie and I did not believe that our family story would have a happy ending. We thought that Jordana, if she survived or lived, would have a very different outcome. But because of a lot of support from a lot of people, good programs, the love of family and friends, and a grit in this young woman, and a character that said, I want to live a good life, we're standing here today. And that, more than anything for me personally, in combination with the work I've been privileged to do, is testament to what I know in my heart and my head, which is that this does not have to be the forgotten issue, and people do not have to suffer silently, and we can help more people, and we can create a movement that will make mental health a top-tier public health priority in this society so that no one suffers. Thank you very much. Jordy? Go get him, honey.
It's an honor to be here tonight. First off, I wanted to thank the Dee Hirsch Foundation for this unbelievable opportunity and for all the work that you guys do. I also wanted to say that I am so happy to be here with my dad. When I was a kid, my dad would take me to all his political events, and for as long as I can remember, I'd small talk with people and work the room and shake people's hands, and I just had such a fun time with it, and I honestly think it prepared me for events like this. I look at all of you here tonight, and I feel an overwhelming sense of joy. If someone had told me 8 years ago that I would be standing here and speaking in front of the biggest mental health advocates and supporters, I wouldn't have believed them. Most of my childhood was very painful, and I had a lot of experiences that I didn't think I'd live through. I used to feel that I had no purpose and no meaning in my life. But around the time I was 14, I started to daydream that one day, that I would public speak one day. I used to have this fantasy that I would get up in front of a crowd and speak and that it would make an impact. But I never really believed that I could do it. And I used to think that everything that I was going through had to be for something. There had to be a reason attached to it. And little did I know that there was. I am so grateful for this opportunity to be here. And when I told my story about a year ago, I was honestly very scared. I didn't know how people would react. I didn't know if I wouldn't get a job because of it. I didn't know how I would be. And honestly, it has been the most incredible experience. I have gotten nothing but positive responses and encouragement, and I am so glad that me doing this has helped other people, because that's the only thing that I want. I also believe that we must always look for an opportunity to help someone. It is each of our duties to take the time out of our busy lives to help those in need and lend a hand wherever it may be needed. I lend my hand out to others in hopes that they ease the pain that they feel when dealing with their mental health. I remember so clearly how I felt, how scared I was, how angry I was, and how alone I felt. I have graciously been presented with an opportunity to give back, to help others who are right where I was 8 years ago. And my heart fills up with joy each time I hear someone's story of struggle, triumph, and renewal of strength, because I believe that each of us here tonight has a duty to open our hearts to those in need. We must love them when they least deserve it, we must fight for them when they are weak, and we must all remember how much better the world could be if we all pitch in a little bit every day. Each of our efforts will not go unnoticed, for all of you out here tonight are helping make the world a better place, and I am so honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for sharing your story with us tonight. There's so much compassion and love in this room. It's very overjoying. Thank you so much for being here. Well, now please welcome back to the stage Dr. Curry.
Just one more surprise and we're done. You haven't seen yet tonight the chair of tonight's awards, Sean Amos. He's also an officer on the board of D.D. Hirsch. I met him 10 years ago after I read an article in the LA Times about him. He just released, thank you, Shirley May, an album that poured out of him after his mother's suicide. I was struck by his raw courage, how he talked about his mother's suicide and his painful childhood. He went at it head on. But now he's become the Reverend Sean Amos, a soul-stomping blues singer. And the Reverend stares down adversity and celebrates our earthly pleasures. He wrestles the demons to dance, and he wrestles cries into hollers. What better way to end the evening than with our own very Reverend Sean Amos singing the blues.
Let me go where the wind blows. Let me Let me go where the wind blows. Let me go where the light. Hey! Let me go. Let me go. Lord, let me go. Oh, let me go. No, 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 no. Take me away. Up and away. Let me go. Take my blues skies away. Let me go. Oh Lord, let me go. Let me go. Hey, I don't wanna stay on those gray clouds. I don't wanna stay around those gray clouds. Oh, let me go. Oh, let me go. Yeah, yeah, One more for Roll Home. I got my mojo working, but it just don't work on you. I got my mojo working, but it just don't work on you. I wanna love you so bad, I don't know what to do. I'm going down to Louisiana, I'm gonna give me a mojo hand. I'm going down to Louisiana, I'm gonna give me a mojo hand. I'm gonna have all you women right under my command. All right. Got my mojo working. 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 Got my mojo working, but it just don't work on you. on you. Thank you to the ones who lost. Thank you to the ones still here. Thank you to Jordana and Daryl and Mary and Howard and Kia and Diddy Hush and Wendy Lehman. Lord, 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 Lord. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll see you next year, okay?